Hi there, my name is Mernaz, and today in this video I'm going to be explaining the fundamentals of Punnett crosses to you and going over some important vocabulary terms that come along with doing these types of biology problems.
Okay, let's get started. So first it tells us that dimples are dominant to no dimples, and a widow's peak is dominant to a straight hairline. And we're asked, what are the resulting genotypes and phenotypes of the following cross? A person who is homozygous for dimples, heterozygous for a widow's peak, crossed with a person who is homozygous for no dimples and homozygous for a straight hairline. So first, let's go over what those terms mean. A genotype is the actual genes that a person has. So in this case, that would be, for example, a large D for dimples. The phenotype is the actual physical features that a person exhibits when they have certain genes. So an easy way to remember this is how they start. A genotype is for the genes, and a phenotype is for the physical characteristics. Okay, we have some other terms here. So homozygous and heterozygous. Heterozygous means different. So that's when you have the two different alleles. So in this case, if we're talking about dimples, a heterozygote would be someone who has positive for dimples and negative for dimples, or the capital and lowercase d. Someone who is homozygous for dimples would either be both positive or both negative. You see how those are both the same type of allele, the same type of gene for both of the alleles. And remember that we do have two alleles, one that comes from the mother and one that comes from the father. Okay, one other thing to identify here is if it says that it is a dominant allele. That means that in the case of the heterozygote, when you just have one positive, the phenotype, the physical characteristic, would go to the dominant trait, the dimples. That doesn't really apply when you have the homozygous traits. You either have both of them positive, dimples, or both of them negative, no dimples. But in the case where you have a heterozygote, a both positive and a negative, you need to know which is the dominant trait. Alright, so now let's start working on the problem. Let's first start by assigning what kind of genotype each person has. Okay, so let's look at the first person. They're homozygous for dimples. Well, if they're homozygous and they have dimples, then they must be two uppercase D's. They're heterozygous for a widow's peak. There's only one way we can write someone who's heterozygous, an upper and a lower. Okay, that's the first person. Let's look at the second person. Homozygous for no dimples. So homozygous, they're both the same, and no dimples, they both must be negative. And homozygous for a straight hairline. So remember, widow's peak is dominant, so if they have a straight hairline, those must both be lowercase as well. So now we need to look at each of these people and consider the different gametes that they will produce to make offspring. So when we're making a gamete, we choose one of each of the alleles. So let's start with the first person. For the dimples trait, both of them are positive D. But for the W's, there are two different cases, uppercase or lowercase. So these are the different gametes that person can produce. Let's look at the other case. In either way, a lowercase d and a lowercase w will be given. So there's only one possibility here. So now let's go ahead and make a cross using what we know so far. So from the first person, we can either have the uppercase D, uppercase W, or uppercase D, lowercase w. And we'll go ahead and draw on a cross. And for the second person, there's only one possibility. So now we can go ahead and fill in our cross. How we're going to do this is we're basically going to, from each column and row, just pull in the number, what we have for those values. So we have DW and WW. So one uppercase and one lowercase for each. So this is a heterozygous case. And it asks us for the genotype and phenotype of each possibility. So let's go ahead and write those in here. So for dimples, we have heterozygote. And because dimples is dominant, they will have dimples. And the same is actually also true for the widow's peak. That is also a hetero, and it's dominant, so it's a widow's peak. Okay, let's look at the other possibility. So uppercase D, lowercase w, and lowercase w, lowercase w. So in this case, we see that we have the same result for dimples, hetero with dimples, but we have the opposite case here for the widow's peak. That's a homozygote, and since homozygote recessive in this case, because it's lowercase, we have a straight hairline.
I hope that video was helpful and you were able to learn more about doing a Punnett square cross using two different traits. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much.